Thank you for having me here, Open Social. This was a great talk and very practical and very good questions also to get into the nuts and the bolts, because that's usually what is not being talked about enough. So I really like that. Very diverse group here. So that for me, I am very curious about your questions that will come later. So I will try to keep the talk as short as possible. Half an hour is always a challenge for me. So what I really liked was that there is a diversity of ways of getting people together. And my main goal is the communities of practice, the communities of circumstance, the community of actions. So really getting people together to talk together, to interact together. So consultations for me, that would mean more like a community of research, or, to have an audience that interacts with you. Of course, there are elements of community, but I think that's important to define. So I've been working with communities since 2008. I'm a psychologist in nature. So that's always my main drive, to understand people, to understand how they interact, to understand what their drives are. And I work for a lot of different organizations the last 15 years. So that's where my knowledge comes from. Foundations, associations, governmental, also some international, very, very big variety. And we wrote a book on it in 2019 together with my ex-companion of Bint, Peter Staal. I'm wondering if this is the right. Yeah, this is the right. So first, I always want to start with what is community, because when I come at organizations and we talk about community, then usually every group, a team, a project, an event is called a community. And I think there is always where not the problem starts, but the struggle starts. That when you use a community approach on a group that is not a community, or that doesn't want to be a community, or has no interest in becoming a community, then the approach doesn't really work. So a community could be all kinds of things. Obviously, it could be people that share the same background, or frustrated about something, that go into actions together. Could be communities that, people that drive the same motorcycle. You'll be surprised how much these, usually men, have in common, beside the fact that they drive the same motorcycle. Communities could be a family, but they don't always have to be. So I think to understand what community is, you have to understand whether there is a sense of community, whether the people in that group actually feel like, hey, I belong to a community, and I feel it's tied to my identity, and it gives me purpose. And some families, they are very tight, and others, they are a little bit less tight. They have less in common. Of course, student groups, you can imagine temporarily, but also for longer duration. This is also something that we could call a community, people that come together because there is a certain urgency, like cleaning up a beach. A beautiful situation is also when a whale gets stranded, and then everybody who's in the surrounding, they collaborate perfectly together. They're all very driven. They see the result. They really want to do it together, and obviously they cannot do it alone. So these are also communities. And then you can wonder whether a football team or soccer team is a community. And if they might get better results if they play like a community, or they might get worse results if they play as a community. So it's all basically about what are the interhuman relationships within that group, and what do they need to feel like a community. Anybody has ideas of what there is needed to feel like a community? Just shout something. Oh no, you cannot do that. Huh? We need the... Purpose, shared purpose, yes. Empathy. Anything else that needs to be there? Shared way of communication. Teamwork. Open. Willingness. Feeling of attachment. Shared values. Commitment. There's one thing I haven't heard, which is... Huh? Learning from each other. Yeah, but what is needed? What is the base? Trust. And what's the other one? Trust and safety. Psychological safety. So I am always happy to be a psychologist, because for people actually to say, I'm going to commit to this community, there has to be a sense of trust, a sense of psychological safety, a sense of identity. And unfortunately, these things, they grow over time. So many organizations, they think, okay, we got the platform, we have the target group, we invite them, and then we have a community. Whereas a community grows more valuable over time because people feel this sense of commitment, they feel the safety, or they not feel it. But that's what we aim to do, obviously. What community is not, per se, is an audience. But I don't know if you know the very big fans of Lady Gaga. What are they called? What is their name? Huh? Little Monsters, yeah. So you could say that within an audience, you could identify communities. So that's, I always say, within a network, you could identify communities. So there are clusters of people that might have more in common than just the theme or just the interest or just the background. So communities are really groups of people who have a lot of things in common. And usually they have things in common that they're not even aware of. They're very latent there. And it's really about a feeling of recognizing each other, of being triggered in either a positive or a negative way that keeps people coming back. So I think that is important to understand what is community. And I just came back from a very interesting summit with Etienne and Beverly Wenger, which, of course, Etienne Wenger coined the term community practice in 1989. And I really like his definition. And what also strikes me is that he basically says learning or knowledge sharing is almost an incidental outcome from community. So usually you see people that are so focused on the knowledge sharing or the learning that they forget about the fact that you need community in order to do that successfully. So why don't we take a little bit more time to create community first, a sense of community, a sense of identity, trust, safety, and then, almost as a thing on the side, hey, we got learning, hey, we got knowledge sharing. So it's, I think, a different way of looking at it. So then when you know this definition, you should always, and that's what I really liked about your story, you should be very critical. So is community the right approach for us? Because most of the times it's not. Most of the times you can do great with a panel or with a sounding board group, or, there are many ways of getting people together and getting their opinions and getting their insights without having to create the sense of community. Obviously, I am an advocate for communities. And once you get community, you get like the cherry on the pie or on the cake. Because if you have that, usually you have loyalty and longevity, and it's very sustainable. But many people, they're not open to go there. Many people are not even so connected to themselves. So it's very difficult to connect to other people. So it's important to understand, where is your target group at? Are they willing to do that? Do they understand what it is? Do they have the time? Do they have the space? Do they have the, the safety to feel like that? And if they don't, just like in Nina's story, you can just say, okay, there are alternatives. Go to another platform, have a different approach, and see where it goes from there. I think that would be very powerful, because in many organizations, it all has to be community, because they get, from leadership says, we should become a community-driven organization. So everything you do, every activity, every project, every event should be community-driven, but it's basically impossible, because not everybody feels like connecting all the time with everybody. So, and then we have a couple of characteristics, of course, like I said before, with communities, theoretically. When we start with community, usually the group is very small. So it's impossible to just say, okay, we got a target group of 300-400, and we invite them all at once, and let's see if they connect. But people, they're not so great at that, because people, they connect to a relatively small group that they have, an insight of, that they feel safe with, that they understand, okay, I know these people, they're like me. So because of that, we always choose a typical community, like whether it's practice that binds them, whether it's a circumstance, whether it's an interest, or whether it's a type or a location. And of course, this is theoretically, because usually very successful communities have much more in common. Usually have and a location and a practice and an interest and an action that they do. But in the beginning, you really want to be very like niche. Really think about, so what do these people have in common? And usually you think it's practice. Like, for example, the Harley Davidson drivers. You would think what they have in common is that Harley Davidson, that love for Harley Davidson. Are there any Harley Davidson owners here in the audience? Yeah. So maybe you can confirm this. But to buy a Harley, it's not the cheapest bike. So you need a certain income most of the time. And what I've heard from the Harley Davidson community, that most of the times these men have very heavy jobs, a lot of responsibility. They're either lawyers, they're doctors. So the fact that the bike is there doesn't mean that necessarily connects them. It could also be the fact that they have a very stressful job, that they like to be out there, just get away from their very heavy job. So you always have to look a little bit further than just the theme or just the location. And you'll be surprised how much people could have in common. Then we have this very nasty one, which I always find very nasty because it's the participation equality. You must know this. In our society, we have a relative small group of people who are willing to take on leadership roles. Most of community managers will recognize this. If you don't have that top group of people who are willing to take this informal leadership, then it's very difficult to build a community. Those are the people who are naturally extroverted. Those are the people who are usually the experts. Those are the people who are willing to work on the community because they see the purpose. But what I've understood is that also in the discussions with Etienne, is that we might have this right now, but we as community managers have a big role of changing this and looking at leadership in a different way. Usually what we do with the top group is we give them a lot of responsibilities. They become the expert and they become the organizer and they become the ones who post a lot of content. And this group is usually very hesitating, doesn't really know what to do, and looks up to that group on top. And I think we have to be smarter about this and find more ways of defining leadership also in very small steps, in very small roles, very small activities, and make it easier for people throughout our society to take ownership, to take responsibility, to take the roles that maybe they would be great at fulfilling, but they are maybe insecure, or maybe they are thinking, oh, I could never do it as well as that expert or that person that always steps forward. So this is something that I really like to work on and see how we can change these programs in communities to make more people engage. And it really means on a psychological level that people need to be self-aware. Do you want to become an informal leader? What does it mean to you? Does it scare you? What do you need to take on responsibility? What are your fears and what are your resistance? So we should work really on a more psychological level, I think, with people to see if we can get more engagement throughout the society. And then we have these ambassadors that I'm sure Nina would also recognize, because I can imagine for every community of practice, you also have your group of ambassadors. And many times I see organizations that just basically see them as influencers or brand ambassadors. But of course, these people are so much more than that. These people are basically the community managers of the group. These people, they define a lot of things that happen in the group. These people can make decisions. These people can literally break or make the community. So it's very important to, from the beginning, understand not only who these people need to be, but also what kind of responsibilities you can give them. Because yesterday I had this great talk and it was all about, we need a community for connection. We need people to be able to connect and to find each other. But what you need community also for is for autonomy. That's basically a new way of organizing, that people can become autonomous, that they can do things themselves, that they can see the influence they have on a community. So, and these people, in order to put them really in a place of responsibility, you have to give them that autonomy. And for many organizations, this is a very, scary point, because why would we give these people all this autonomy? They don't work for the organization. But it's an important step to make. And then within communities, like I said before, I'm a psychologist, so I like to take theories from psychology. Many times the idea is to have like this wicked content or content that goes viral. We're all searching for this perfect piece of, knowledge sharing. But like I said before, autonomy, competence, and relatedness that come from the self-determination theory, which is a theory from the psychology that works for us all, that if we want to be engaged in something, we have to have a feeling of, I can choose myself. I'm surrounded by people that I respect and that reflect myself. But I'm also able to achieve something. So it's very important in communities that people have the idea, like, what are we achieving together? So community management is also a lot about processes. It's about, okay, what are we going to do next? And with who are we going to do that next? And what kind of processes do we need in place to be able for people to easily step into these roles? And then, the roles are very important. So usually what I hear is that there is one community manager that has to kind of like get everybody engaged. Whereas we always from the beginning, we divide the roles. So together with this first core group, we are running the community. If we cannot do this in the first months, then we basically decide this will not be a community. This will be more an audience or a network, but we cannot make it work without these roles. And people are willing to take up these roles, which usually are very awkward situations, because these could be professionals, this could be partners, this could be, people who already have very full-time jobs. And then you're asking them also to take a role in this community without paying them. So it always feels awkward, but I have never had a situation where I ask the right ambassador to pick up a role that they say, I don't want to. So it's really about selecting or identifying, really, and inviting the right type of ambassador. And then we have the norming, storming, forming. That is also such an important theory in community engagement. This comes from sociology, and maybe you know it from Tuckman. A group, in order to become really a community, they have to have a moment of, confrontational things. So you see a lot of organizations are trying to keep things nice, trying not to have confrontations because we're so afraid that people might walk away, whereas it gives you enormous possibilities for people to really connect and to understand, okay, where are you at? What do you need? What is your true personality? So in order to learn from each other, in order to share real knowledge, sometimes you also have to, set boundaries and have a little bit of a intense conversation, let's call it like that. But it's very important that this is being moderated well. So I like the question before also about community management, is to really be, have community managers that understand this and are able to guide these kind of processes in the right way, so that the community actually becomes stronger after they go through a storming phase, instead of everybody running away because this is not what they're used to. So this is probably impossible for you to read because, first of all, it's in Dutch because I haven't had it translated in English. But I can share the slides with you, or if you want to have this more explained, please come to me and I will share it with you. But these are basically the steps that we have worked with for a lot of years with a lot of different organizations. And I really liked what Nina said, because a lot of these steps, they are basically what Nina said. So first is about researching, defining your target group, coming to a niche, really understanding their intrinsic drives, and then starting with a relative small group that have a lot of things in common, which really, are associated with the community of practice definition. And then together with that group, you define everything. You define the means, because, it all depends on what they want to do. You define the strategy, you define the themes, you define the knowledge sharing, and you make them responsible and you give them that autonomy from the beginning, so that they can actually feel like this is our community. I have ownership over this and this is my responsibility. And then you actually facilitate them. So that's, of course, the magical word. Good facility management. That is, no, it's not, we don't say it like that in Dutch, but to facilitate, to know how to facilitate, that is not talked about enough, I believe. So to understand, really, to listen to people, to understand what they need, to connect them to other people with the same needs, to come up with a creative concept, to have brainstorms with them, like, okay, maybe this is not going deep enough, maybe this is not fulfilling your needs. How can we do this? Like, really take time with the community to understand where it needs to grow. That is all in that last phase. And we keep on doing that over and over again. So that's why the whole role of community manager is such an important one, because it's a real leader, and it's also somebody who really is able to resonate what the community gives back. So usually community managers are in touch with the community every day, all the time, with members, to really be able to put, the temperature there and to understand what is needed. So that's about community management. You can say a lot about it, but basically it's to identify the needs. So you don't build communities, basically you identify needs. And then based on those needs, you connect people. And then you could see whether community is willing to develop. And if it's willing to develop, then you delegate the roles. You make the processes very clear, the criteria, so that people know what they're working towards, that people understand what they could do, that people also understand who is able to join and who is not able to join. So these are all, criteria to make you feel safe. And then you facilitate. And then once you see that from a community there is a new theme or a new group that wants to come out, then you start the process again. So for every small group, it needs that same amount of attention. And I think then you can have a very diverse community, which is like an umbrella with all these sub-communities that I think you are also talking about, which is consultation, but also community of practice. And maybe you have a sounding board, and maybe you have webinars. And all these things are various ways of engaging people. And community is just one of those approaches. And they should all just be integrated so that people can see, based on their needs and where they're at and the time that they have, what kind of activity they want to do. So I think that was it. I'm curious if you have any questions.
So much. Questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Anna from the Global Landscapes Forum, and I was just wondering about your community ambassadors and the roles that you give to the community. You mentioned that they're not paid, and I wonder what are the incentives that they have to actually take up these roles? Like how do they actually get convinced almost to take up these roles?
Yeah, so great question. The thing is that we never try to convince anybody. So we're really looking for people that already are doing this on smaller platforms, or people that are really cannot wait to do this, or maybe they share their expertise among their colleagues or their own network. So we basically present them with a platform and say, we could collaborate and we could give you this platform and we could give you the knowledge and we could give you the network. So I think that's the main element of community management, is to never try to seduce or convince, but facilitate what is already there. And then people will never ask for money, because it's a great way of identifying a true ambassador. If they start asking for money, which of course they have every right to do, but it's not the type of ambassador that I'm searching for the community.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Inge. I'm from eRobotics. I have a question. We are in the very beginning phase of our community platform. We just launched it like half a year. And one thing that struck me in your presentation was that you say, okay, when you have this community, you start with targeting the audience, and then you have like a small group together working on these common goals. Now, we did the same approach, and the best feedback I got was not from this group, but from my own husband, who is a chef cook. So, because he was kind of outside the community, he didn't have the tunnel vision that we were all on, because we were the same community. So, do you have any input on thoughts on that? So, is it also not like, how do you say that, a pitfall when you have all these people from your own community? Is it also sometimes worth stepping out of this and just asking somebody who's completely out of, the community, the shared goals, etc., to have a look at this process of community building.
And then you mean, about the process.
Yeah, the process, yeah.
And then what exactly was it that your husband said that was so striking, so different from how it was going?
Well, I have a lot of examples, but they are really specified to our community, which is robotics and artificial intelligence. So it's quite different, but it's more or less. I think it's more or less the tunnel view that you create when you are trying to build this community within your own network. Not sure if it's making sense what I'm saying, but you kind of land up in this common goals and approach, and everybody thinks the same because you have the shared goals. But sometimes it's really good to step out of it and have somebody looking at it who has no relation at all. That I understand. I relate to that. We're very careful when we're creating this first core group that we're not creating, that we're basically identifying and then getting them together. And it's very important in a group, and that's typical psychology theory, the groupthink. That people start to influence each other. So sometimes as a community manager, you want to just invite a advocate of the devil's advocate, or somebody who comes from the creative field and just looks at things very differently. But it is important though to really guide this process very carefully, because we as people, we feel safe in a group that we know, in a group that we feel like we belong. And if you introduce somebody with a completely different view, the group could be very stressed out by that, because that's how we humans work. But it is interesting to say to the group, could it be that we're a little bit, in a tunnel vision? Could it be interesting to just invite some people to challenge us? Are we open to that? And then you can make a deliberate action of it. And that could be very valuable, I agree.
Does that answer? Do you want to follow? Great, thanks.
Thank you, Eric from the European Commission. I actually want to relate to this, because in the slide with the 4 squares you had identify, and I've been in one community for 10 years, and if you always do that, then you stay in the group and it's safe. But as the group matures, you know that the trust is there. So from a psychological point of view, when would you say, or what could be a process to, stimulate people so that it's not only about identify, but you want to grow also?
Yeah.
And how to do that so that you're not in the safe area all the time, but that you can grow also elsewhere, and how to manage that within the community to avoid that people get annoyed?
Yeah, very good question. So what we do with the first members of the community is to really take them, and engage them with all these theories. So make them understand that once we ride on our way, probably within 3-4 months, you don't want anybody to join the group anymore. And it's normal that you feel like that. But we will consciously go against that, because we want to grow as a community and we want to deepen the knowledge. So it's basically also what I said to you for the other question, was that you have to deliberately start to inviting people and go to the process of people saying, we don't like that. So the fact that there is a confrontation, I see it many times, for example, with professionals from municipalities, and then you invite a professional from a consultancy that have a lot of knowledge about the topic. And first, the group, they don't want that person, because that they will steal our knowledge. They will only come here to sell their products. So, and just to have the conversation about that and getting all those fears and doubts and resistance on the table and actually talk about that strengthens the community. So all these kind of things, just to have discussions about growth. What does it mean to you, growth? What kind of growth do you need? All fantastic discussions to have to grow the community, and very non-rocket science, but not many times organizations take time to do this kind of thing. This is really like the process of community building, without skipping this process and going immediately to the results. Yeah.
1 second.
This has been a really interesting and inspiring presentation. So Patricia,
thank you.
Community Manager for the new COP on prevention. I have a question. Of course, our world is changing. And in the past, the communities I have been involved in have been communities that originated in a face-to-face and interaction, right? On conferences, on repeated meetings, on things. And now, of course, we are trying to build communities online without this constitution of a group that knows each other like we do here now. So I'm wondering if you can give us some tips on how to overcome the struggles with that.
That it's all digital.
Yes.
Today.
And the struggles of building trust, building safe spaces, getting to know each other to the level that you are open to share.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing is that right now I am working with a company of the Wageningen University, and they're creating this community for over 800 African professionals all over the continent that are busy with soil information providing. These are all different countries. These are all different functions. They have a whole different culture, the way of addressing each other. And we have been working on that group for a year with processes, small webinars, making it very conscious, the things that which are very typical for people to feel, like fear, fear of missing out, fear of exclusion, fear of somebody else passing you by. And I think it's very important to have people in your community that are willing to learn about this. So you need people that can self-reflect. I think that's very important in this whole transition from going to physical world to the digital world. Because it is different digital space, but it is not less valuable. So there's a lot of things that we can do digitally that we could never do physically. For example, like for the UN, that would be impossible to do it physically. And to come together like once a year or once every 3 years, to be able to come together, it's an incredible celebration. So it could also be a strength to actually see that the physical coming together, it's almost like a reward that the community builds towards on a digital platform. Of course, when you're in the same location, it's easier. What we usually do is really integrate physical with digital. And it means actually opening physical meetings with the digital platform, closing physical meetings with the digital platform. So we really try to prolong everything that we do in a physical event, prolong it to the online environment and vice versa. It has to become a equal, valuable environment, but each with their own typical characteristics and pros and cons. To give you a small answer.
Thank you. Okay, last question, Taco.
Thank you. We are talking a lot about human connections and trust and safety as a basis for community development. We are now introducing AI, not just in open social, but also in our lives. And you see the struggle between, can I trust this thing? And it's scary. It's also helpful? What is your vision or advice from a psychological introduction of this? And it maybe per se for open social, but I think it's broader in all our lives. It's starting to play a role. So what would be your takeaway for us?
Yeah, great question also that. I mean, we have also discussed this a lot with Etienne and his wife. The funny thing is that I have personally, I'm very positive towards AI. So this will paint my response, obviously. And what you see already with ChatGPT, for example, I don't know who's using the 4.0, but if you build kind of like a personal conversation, like, thank you, that has been very helpful, please take your time, you see that the answers become better. And we're just in the 3rd year. So with AI, it's not really a question of like, are we for or against, because we will have to work with it. And when we were in the discussion with Etienne asked me, he said, why don't you ask ChatGPT what he thinks of this? And while they were discussing, I was discussing with ChatGPT and came with some brilliant answers to how ChatGPT could contribute in a community. Not a one-on-one, but really in the group. And it was modest, and it said, I could help you with this, I could help you with that, and I could also make sure that I am the AI, so you don't have to feel threatened. So I think it will be introduced pretty quickly into communities because it will have so much knowledge and it will help the conversation. But yeah, it could go rogue the other way. I don't know, but I prefer to be positive. And yeah, that's what community managers see. They see a lot of good possibilities, opportunities.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kirsten.
Thank you.